It was a cold evening when the snow fell gently from the sky and the park was glowing with the warmth of golden streetlights. Families were walking together hand in hand, and the sound of laughter filled the air. But on one bench near the wooden cafe window, a man sat alone. He was dressed in an elegant coat with a scarf wrapped neatly around his neck, his eyes fixed on the ground as if searching for something he had lost long ago. His name was Adrian, a man known in the city as a powerful CEO who had everything: money, status, respect, yet in the silence of his heart, he carried a loneliness so heavy that no amount of success could cure. He had spent years building his empire, closing deals, traveling across continents, and earning more than he could ever spend. But what he never built was a family. He lived in a large house filled with silence and emptiness. And tonight, as he sat on that bench, surrounded by the joy of others, he felt the weight of that emptiness more than ever. Then, she appeared, a little girl no older than 5, wearing a pink dress under a small gray cardigan, her boots crunching softly on the snow as she walked, her cheeks rosy from the cold. Her big, innocent eyes fixed on Adrian as if she had known him all along. Without hesitation, she walked closer and stopped right in front of him. He raised his eyes, surprised by her presence. She looked at him seriously yet sweetly, and said the words that made his heart tremble. "You can be in our family if you want." Adrian blinked for a moment, unsure if he heard right. His throat tightened and he whispered softly, "What did you say, little one?" She repeated with a shy smile, "My mommy says our family is small and sometimes lonely. But I think you look lonely too, so you can be in our family if you want." The simplicity of her words hit him harder than any business negotiation ever had. No one had ever offered him such a gift. No one had ever seen through his walls of wealth and success to the man sitting inside, a man longing for connection. Adrian felt something warm in his chest, something he had almost forgotten how to feel: hope. He slowly reached out his hand, and the little girl, without hesitation, placed her tiny hand in his. Hers was soft, fragile, but filled with trust. He looked at her with eyes that suddenly felt wet and whispered, "Why would you choose me?" The little girl giggled, tilting her head. "Because you look like you need someone to sit with, and I think my mommy would like you too." At that moment, a woman appeared, walking quickly through the falling snow, her face filled with worry as she called out, "Lily, there you are." She reached the bench and gently pulled the little girl close her eyes, then turned to Adrian and softened with embarrassment. "I am so sorry. She tends to talk to strangers sometimes. I hope she did not bother you." Adrian shook his head, his voice quiet but steady. "She did not bother me. She might have just changed my life." The woman looked at him, puzzled, her hands holding her daughter close. Adrian cleared his throat and said, "Your daughter has a kind heart. She reminded me of something I had forgotten, that family is not about wealth or power, but about love and presence." The woman smiled faintly, though still cautious. She said, "Well, she always sees the good in people, even when I tell her to be careful." The little girl tugged her mother's sleeve and whispered, "But Mommy, he is nice, and he is lonely. Can we help him?" Adrian heard every word, and for the first time in years he laughed softly, a sound that startled even him. The woman studied him carefully, his expensive coat, his well-groomed hair, the seriousness in his eyes, and yet she also saw the loneliness there, the same loneliness her daughter had sensed. She hesitated, then asked, "Are you here alone?" Adrian nodded. "Yes, always alone." The woman's expression softened. She looked around at the families walking past, at the glowing lights, and then back at him. Perhaps because she too understood what it felt like to be lonely. She extended her hand and said, "My name is Clara, and this little troublemaker is Lily." Adrian shook her hand gently, introducing himself simply as Adrian. He did not tell her about his empire or his fortune, because at that moment none of it mattered. From that evening, something changed. Adrian found himself returning to that same park again and again, sometimes with small gifts for Lily, a book, a toy, or even just hot chocolate, other times with nothing but his presence. Slowly, Clara began to see that behind the powerful man was a soul that longed for connection. He would sit with them on snowy evenings, listen to Lily's stories, and sometimes even walk them home carrying their groceries or helping with small tasks. As weeks turned into months, the bond grew stronger. Clara had lost her husband years ago and had raised Lily alone. She was cautious about letting anyone new into their lives, but Adrian showed her through his actions that he was not a man of empty promises. He was there consistently, not with wealth but with warmth, not with power but with patience. One evening, as they sat again in the park with snow falling around them, Lily climbed onto Adrian's lap and whispered, "Remember what I said that day? You can be in our family if you want. Well, Mommy said you already are." Adrian froze, his eyes filling with tears. He looked at Clara, who smiled softly, nodding with quiet acceptance. In that moment, Adrian realized that he had found the one thing money could never buy. He had found love. He had found belonging. He had found a family, and it all began with the simple words of a little girl who looked into his lonely heart and offered him a place in hers. From then on, the man who once sat alone on a bench watching the joy of others was no longer alone. He walked hand in hand with Clara and Lily through the snowy streets of the city, a man no longer defined by his empire but by the family who chose him, not for his wealth, not for his name but for his heart, and for the first time in his life Adrian truly felt at home.